The transmission is live. The fog of war is thick, but the signal is clear. Welcome back to the front lines of the physical truth. You were told the supply chain was healing. You were told the transition to green energy was a smooth, calculated pivot. They lied. While the mainstream talking heads discuss interest rate pivots and soft landings, a tectonic plate has just shifted in the southern hemisphere. This is the supply chain snap, and it is the moment the paper lies of the banking cartel finally met the immovable wall of reality. In the early hours of this week, the grid didn't just flicker, it went dark. We are talking about the complete vanishing of 15% of the world's physical silver production. To understand the scale of this liquidity tsunami, you have to stop looking at the flashing numbers on your screen and start looking at the map. Peru, the silver heart of the world, has effectively been severed from the global body. The cause? A lethal cocktail of internal collapse and external aggression. While you were sleeping, the friction between Washington and Caracas reached the boiling point. The U.S. intervention in Venezuela hasn't just destabilized one nation. It has turned the Caribbean and the South Pacific shipping corridors into a no-go zone. We are seeing reports of cargo vessels carrying raw concentrate, the lifeblood of our digital world, turning back to port or being seized in the crossfire. Think about that. For every 100 ounces of silver the world expects to use today, 15 of them simply do not exist on the open market anymore. They are trapped in the high Andes or sitting in hulls that cannot move. This is the red zone. But the crisis isn't just at sea. Inside Peru, the behavioral sink is accelerating. Massive protests have paralyzed the southern mining corridor. The workers, the very people who pull the physical truth from the earth, have realized their leverage. They aren't just striking for wages. They are rejecting a system that exports their national wealth in exchange for collapsing fiat promises. From the massive pits of Antamina to the veins of Vulcan, the machinery has gone silent. The banking cartel is in a blind panic. Why? Because their entire system of control relies on the illusion of obtainium. They sell you silver they don't have, backed by mines they don't control, delivered through routes they can no longer protect. When Peru went off the grid, they didn't just lose a supplier, they lost the ability to pretend the paper lies were real. Historical parallels are screaming at us right now. Look back to the panic of 1893, when the sudden withdrawal of silver from the monetary system caused a total collapse of the rail networks and bank runs that wiped out a generation of wealth. But back then, they were fighting over how to use the metal. Today, we are fighting over whether the metal even exists in the vaults. The silver price isn't moving up because of inflation. It's moving because of extinction. The physical metal is undergoing a mass disappearance. In the LBMA and the COMEX, the panic is palpable. We are seeing delivery delays stretching from weeks into months. The liquidity tsunami is no longer a metaphor. It is a wave of frantic buy orders hitting a dry sea. If you think this is just a temporary disruption, you aren't paying attention to the physical truth. And this is the snap. When 15% of a global necessity vanishes in a single week, the equilibrium doesn't just shift, it breaks. We are now living in a world where obtainium is the only currency that matters, and the gates to the Peruvian treasury have just been welded shut. The intelligence is clear. The supply chain isn't just broken, it's been redesigned by history, and those who are left holding paper receipts for Peruvian silver are about to learn the most expensive lesson of 2026. The grid is dark, the ships are idle, and the physical truth is finally standing on its own. The physical truth is no longer a secret whispered in backrooms. It's a neon sign flashing over the skyline of Shanghai. While the West sleeps, the East has built a fortress, and the walls are made of solid silver. For decades, the banking cartel in London and New York maintained the illusion that they were the masters of the silver universe. They used high-frequency trading and paper lies to suppress the price, treating silver like a discarded byproduct of the copper mines. But on January 1st, 2026, the dragon stopped playing the game. The Shanghai Gold Exchange, or the SGE, has officially detached from the Western script. As we speak, physical silver in Shanghai is trading at a staggering premium compared to the paper price on the COMEX. We are talking about a disconnect that has shattered the old world order. For every ounce of silver available in London, the buyers in Shanghai are paying a massive surcharge just to secure the physical metal. This is the liquidity tsunami flowing in one direction, east. But this isn't just about a price gap. This is a strategic snap. Beijing has implemented a new ironclad export licensing regime. They haven't just limited exports. They have effectively nationalized every gram of silver within their borders. Only a handful of state-certified giants are now allowed to move metal across the border, and even then, only with a direct thumbprint from the Ministry of Commerce. Why? Because China has realized the physical truth that Washington is still trying to ignore. You cannot build a 2026 economy on digital promises. Silver is the nervous system of the future. Every high-performance AI chip, every next-generation solar panel, and every advanced drone system requires the most conductive element on the periodic table. By locking the gates, China has ensured that their obtainium stays home to feed their own industrial machine, while the Western tech giants are left fighting over the scraps. This is the behavioral sink in action. We are seeing major Western corporations, companies whose names are synonymous with the S&P 500, sending back-channel envoys to Shanghai, begging for permission to buy. They are realizing that their long-term contracts with Western banks are worth less than the screen they're typed on. When the paper guillotine finally drops, these companies will realize they've been hedged with air. The data from the SGE is clear. Inventories are being drained into the private vaults of the East at a record pace. While the LBMA vaults in London are bleeding out, the Shanghai fortress is being reinforced. This is a grand arbitrage that has effectively transferred the world's wealth from those who trade paper to those who hold the metal. Think back to the fall of Rome, when the empire's silver currency was debased until it was nothing but copper washed in a thin layer of lies. The citizens realized the physical truth too late, and the real wealth had already fled to the frontiers. Today, the frontiers are the exchanges of the East, and the paper lies of the US dollar are being exposed in real time. The banking cartel is trying to counter this with massive margin hikes on the COMEX, trying to shake out the small hands and suppress the panic. But you can't margin call a superpower that has decided to hoard the world's most critical industrial metal. The Shanghai fortress isn't just a market, it's a statement of sovereignty. The China price is now the only price that matters. If you want the metal, you pay the premium. If you want the future, you go through Shanghai. The era of cheap, subsidized silver for the West is dead. The dragon has closed its claws, and the physical truth is that the East now holds the keys to the grid. The ghosts of the past aren't just haunting the history books. They are walking the floors of the central banks right now, watching the paper lies they spent a century perfecting finally catch fire. To understand why the PERU shutdown is the killing blow, you have to understand the original sin. The mainstream media wants you to believe that silver is just another commodity, like pork bellies or orange juice. They want you to think its value is tied to a spreadsheet. That is the ultimate paper lie. For 5,000 years, silver was the physical truth of the common man. It was the obtainium that protected the worker from the liquidity tsunami of government debt. But in 1873, the banking cartel committed a crime that changed the course of human history. They call it the crime of 1873. In a coordinated strike across the globe from London to Washington, the elites demonetized silver. They stripped the people's money of its status and forced the world onto a rigid gold standard, followed by the ultimate trap, the unbacked fiat system. Why? Because you can't print silver. You can't manifest it out of thin air to fund forever wars and bloated bureaucracies. By killing silver as money, they forced every man, woman, and child into a behavioral sink, where we were forced to compete for crumbs of paper controlled by the cartel. But here is the physical truth they didn't count on. History is a circle, and in 2026, that circle is closing with a vengeance. As the mines in Peru go silent and the shipping lanes turn into a red zone, we are witnessing the great remonetization. This isn't happening because a government passed a law. It's happening because the market is demanding reality. For over 100 years, the cartel used paper lies to suppress the price of silver, making it so cheap that we burned through the planet's stockpiles to build disposable electronics and solar panels. They treated the most vital metal on Earth like industrial trash. They thought they had won. They thought the ghost of 1873 was buried forever. But look at the narrative math of 2026. For every single bar of physical silver being pulled from the Earth today, there are hundreds upon hundreds of digital promises floating in the banking system. Imagine a massive stadium filled with people, each holding a ticket that says they own the same single seat in the front row. That is the silver market today. The cartel has sold the same ounce of silver hundreds of times over. The Peru shutdown is the moment the music stopped. When 15% of the world's supply vanishes, the people holding those hundreds of paper tickets all try to claim that one seat at the same time. This is the liquidity tsunami that the Fed and the LBMA cannot stop. You can print another $1 trillion, but you cannot print a single ounce of Peruvian silver. We are seeing a mirror image of the fall of Rome. When the Romans could no longer find the silver to pay their legions, they began to dilute their coins with copper and lead. They told the people the coins were worth the same, but the physical truth of the marketplace knew better. Prices exploded, the borders collapsed, and the behavioral sink swallowed the empire. In 2026, the US dollar is the new Roman denarius. It is a paper lie backed by nothing but the promise of more debt. Meanwhile, silver, the metal they tried to bury in 1873, has become the ultimate obtainium. It is the only thing that can bridge the gap between the old world of debt and the new world of physical truth. The bankers are terrified because they know that if silver returns to its rightful place as a store of value, their paper empire evaporates overnight. They're fighting the ghost of 1873 with every tool they have: market manipulation, media blackouts, and fabricated supply data. But you cannot manipulate a dry mine. You cannot use a paper lie to build a semiconductor. The great remonetization is here. As the supply chain snaps and the East builds its fortress, the world is remembering what the 1873 cartel tried to make us forget. Silver is not just a metal, it is the only physical truth that can liberate you from the behavioral sink. The ghost has returned, and this time it's not leaving until the paper vaults are empty. The physical truth is a heavy burden, and the banking cartel is about to be crushed by its weight. While the average person stares at a digital ticker, thinking they understand the value of their wealth, they are actually staring at the shadow of a ghost. To understand the terminal state of the global markets in 2026, we must look at the paper guillotine, the mechanism by which the financial elites have severed the price of silver from the reality of the earth. For decades, the COMEX in New York and the LBMA in London have operated on a system of paper lies. They created a digital version of silver that can be printed, traded, and suppressed with the click of a button. But the Peru shutdown has just sharpened the blade. Let's look at the narrative math of this betrayal. Imagine a single, shining bar of physical silver sitting in a high-security vault. In an honest world, that bar belongs to one person. But in the world of the banking cartel, that same bar has been promised to 356 different people at the exact same time. For every single ounce of real, tangible metal that actually exists in the physical truth, there are 356 paper promises, digital receipts, floating in the market. This is the 356.1 disconnect. It is a tower of debt built on a foundation of sand, and the Peru supply chain snap was the earthquake that started the collapse. When 15% of the world's supply vanishes from the grid, the liquidity tsunami doesn't just wash away the weak hands, it exposes the fraud. We are witnessing the moment where those 356 people all show up at the vault door at the same time, demanding their obtainium. But the vault is nearly empty, the LBMA inventories have been bled dry by the Shanghai fortress, and the COMEX registered stocks are at levels not seen since the industrial age began. This is the paper guillotine. When the market realizes that there isn't enough physical metal to satisfy even a fraction of the paper contracts, the blade drops. The price of the paper contract goes to zero because it is a lie, while the price of the physical truth, the metal you can actually hold, goes to infinity. We saw this happen in the early 1930s, during the depths of the Great Depression. The banks had promised more gold than they possessed, and when the people realized the paper lies, they rushed the doors. The government's response wasn't to give the people their metal, it was to criminalize the physical truth with Executive Order 6102. They forced the people to hand over their gold for paper, then immediately devalue that paper. In 2026, the cartel is trying the same play. They are raising margin requirements to astronomical levels, trying to force independent investors to sell their positions and walk away. They are using the behavioral sink to create a state of panic, hoping you will trade your physical truth for the perceived safety of a failing digital dollar. But the math doesn't lie. You cannot settle a 356.1 deficit with a 15% supply cut. The math is terminal. The red zone has expanded to include the very heart of the Western financial system. Every day that the mines in Peru stay silent is a day that the paper guillotine inches closer to the neck of the COMEX. The banking cartel is currently in an emergency settlement phase. They are settling contracts in cash, printing more paper lies to pay off people who thought they owned obtainium. But as the inflation tsunami rises, that cash is becoming worthless. The insider profit sees the endgame, a total systemic reset where the paper markets are shuttered, and the only silver that exists is the silver in your hand. The ratio has peaked. The promises have failed. The physical truth is about to be the only thing left standing when the blade finally hits the floor. We have reached the end of the map. Beyond this point, the paper lies vanish entirely, and only the physical truth remains to light the way. Welcome to the final briefing. The banking cartel wants you to believe that the current chaos is a temporary glitch in the system. They are using their media megaphones to suggest that once the tensions in the Caribbean settle and the Peruvian mines reopen, we will return to the old normal. They are lying. We have entered the terminal deficit, a state from which the current financial architecture cannot recover. Let's look at the raw intelligence for January 2026. The Peru shutdown hasn't just removed 15% of the supply, it has acted as a catalyst for a global supply chain snap. When you combine the Peruvian disappearance with the Shanghai fortress, locking down another 10% of global exports, you're looking at a quarter of the world's annual silver production simply vanishing into a black hole. This isn't just a shortage, it's an extinction event for industrial obtainium. In the behavioral sink, we see the true nature of the banking cartel's desperation. As silver spiked to $84 an ounce last week, the CME Group and the LBMA didn't just raise margins, they effectively declared war on price discovery. They are trying to create a liquidity tsunami in reverse, sucking the oxygen out of the room to force the price back down to 75. But notice the physical truth. While the paper price cools under the weight of margin hikes, the physical premiums in the East are screaming toward $100. The spread is no longer a gap, it's a canyon. Why is the cartel so terrified? Because silver is the conductive core of the 2026 reality. You cannot run the AI data centers that are currently replacing the workforce without silver. You cannot build the drone swarms currently patrolling the red zone in the South Pacific without silver. And you certainly cannot achieve the green transition that the world's governments have promised without the very metal they are currently helping to suppress. The narrative math is undeniable. For the first time in history, industrial demand is completely decoupled from the banking cartel's ability to manipulate it. The silver is gone. It is buried in circuit boards, solar panels, and Tomahawk missiles. It is not coming back to the vaults. We are entering the terminal phase. As the paper guillotine drops on the COMEX, we will see a force majeure event, unlike anything since the fall of Rome. The banks will simply stop settling in metal. They will offer you their failing digital currency as a consolation prize, while they keep whatever physical scraps are left for themselves and their state masters. This is the insider profit protocol for 2026. First, recognize the physical truth. If you cannot touch it, you do not own it. Any silver held in a pool account or a digital certificate is nothing more than a paper lie waiting to be erased. Second, secure your obtainium before the grid goes permanently dark. We are seeing the birth of a two-tier market. There's the official price they tell you on the news, and then there's the real price you pay at the local coin shop or the backroom of a refinery. The gap between those two numbers is the price of your freedom. Finally, prepare for the liquidity tsunami to wash away the last remnants of the old world. As gold pushes toward $5,000 and silver targets the triple digits, the behavioral sink will swallow those who waited for a better entry point. The Peru shutdown was the signal. The Shanghai fortress is the wall. The paper guillotine is the end. We are moving into a world where the only thing that matters is the weight of the metal in your hand and the truth in your heart. The grid is flickering, the supply chain snap is complete, and the insider profit is signing off. The physical truth is yours now. Don't let them take it back.